two of the significant themes in what we have as the first letter from the Apostle Peter in our New Testament. I won't say the dominant themes, but I will say significant themes are justice and suffering. Now, if you drive around your city or basically around the country, you're not likely to see a marquee in front of a church building that says, "Come join us as we study judgment and suffering." That's just not appealing to most Americans. I suppose some people, they would have an interest in that, but generally not so much. Now, if you said, "Join us as we study how to escape suffering," or how to dodge suffering, or why God doesn't want you to suffer, you get a crowd. Or you could say, "Come join us as we study suffering for the sake of social justice." You'd get a crowd. Now, here's the thing, though, and I'm going to really do my best not to get up on a hobby horse, but have to back off. I'm going to get on it for a minute. I'm going to try to not ride it the full mile. See, here's the thing. I am not against social justice, but we are naive if we believe that social justice can ever be achieved and sustained without addressing the justice of God. See, if a culture returns to the justice of God, social justice is going to happen. It's hacking at the leaves, and we need to get to the root. So, okay. We looked at the first part of 1 Peter 4:17 last time, and I want to continue on. "For it is time for judgment to begin with God's household." The judgment will begin. It's time. Yeah. And if it begins with us, what will the outcome be for those who do not obey the gospel of God? You think about what Peter is saying. First of all, he's not writing to the general crowd. He's writing to Christians. Okay. And in his day, there were casual Christians. I'm sure there were, but the ranks tend to be thinned of casual Christians when actual persecution is in the picture. And it was for the people in Peter's day. So he's writing to devoted followers of Christ. And he says, if judgment begins with us, what will the outcome be for those who don't obey the gospel? Well, that's a rhetorical question. The basic answer is they have no hope. There's no hope of achieving a favorable judgment from God if you don't obey the gospel. He goes on then and he quotes from the book of Proverbs, the Septuagint version of the Proverbs. "If it is hard for the righteous to be saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinner?" Well, the obvious answer is nothing good. Now, some people believe, these are called universalists, that God is going, in the end, he's going to say, "I just love everybody too much to send anybody to hell. So everybody goes to heaven. And it don't matter what you done, you're being okay." Okay? Okay, now that obviously is an exaggeration and a ridicule of that line of thinking, and that's unfair. But that's how I am. Well, I'm not a universalist. I believe in God's grace, though, and I believe that people like me who have rejected God's design, have turned away from God's design, have walked my own path, my own selfish, egotistical path, can still turn to grace and embrace God's design. And that's the only thing that will make my judgment, when it comes time for God to judge me, to be any different than when he judges someone who has rejected the gospel and turned it away. I just think we often lose track of that. Really, there is no difference in worthiness between me and the worst of sinners. John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace, you probably already know the story, had been a slave trader. When he met Jesus, it was a dramatic incident in his life. He thought he was going to die. He comes to Jesus, and when he words the song Amazing Grace, how many millions of people have connected with his message in that song? I'm one of them. That amazing grace that saved a wretch like me. I am not worthy. I could never do enough to be worthy to be saved. It is God's grace, His amazing grace, has saved a wretch like me. And that's the only difference between this wretch and any wretch who will be judged and sent to a fiery eternity. You see, I believe it was C.S. Lewis that this is a pretty gross paraphrase of what he said, is that God never intends, He never wanted, and He does not want to send anyone to hell. But He will abide by people's wishes. If you don't choose heaven, if you don't choose God, if you don't say yes to His grace, then you are choosing for yourself to go to hell. Wow, that seems awfully harsh and strong. But it also happens to be the unbiased, unvarnished, unchangeable truth. Peter goes on, so then, this is verse 19, those who suffer according to God's will should commit themselves to their faithful Creator and continue to do good. This is as if Peter is saying, okay, now I've set the table for reality here. You are going to suffer. Things are not going to always go well for you. We are in a world that is broken and imperfect, and that pushes against the truth of God and His judgment. So when that happens, here's what you're supposed to do. Those who suffer according to God's will, two aspects of looking at this, three words, according to God's will. 4 words, sorry, I'm not good with numbers. Some people say, yes, it is God's will that you suffer. And I think that could be true at times, but I do not believe that all suffering comes as a result of God willing it. The majority of suffering, I believe, in my life has come at God's permission. Nothing escapes His view, and either He causes it or He permits it. I think that the suffering that He causes is, in terms of its occurrence, less than the suffering that He permits. So there's that. A second piece of that is when I suffer according to God's will, I think what that means, possibly one of the meanings, is when I suffer as I live according to God's will, and I will suffer when I live in that fashion, because God's will is a pretty dramatic break with most people's will. I'll say it, I've said it a bunch of times, but I'm going to say it again. You will very rarely accidentally follow God's will in your life, because there's so few times that your will is going to naturally align with God's will. And when you consciously and intentionally live according to God's will, you will, not might, you will eventually suffer. And when that happens, he says, They should suffer. They should commit themselves to their faithful Creator and continue to do good. Two difficult things for this boy: to commit myself to my faithful Creator. Wow, these are big ideas. Commit myself. They should commit themselves. I should commit myself to my faithful Creator. Commit. Again, we rarely make accidental commitments. Sometimes we find that we've committed ourselves to something we didn't realize we had committed ourselves to, right? Like the fine print on a contract or terms of agreement. I didn't bother to read that, and I made a commitment that I didn't realize I had made, right? But to commit yourself, you will never accidentally commit yourself to God. We do this intentionally. We do this as an act of our will. One commits out of their will. Commit themselves to their faithful Creator. We live in a culture that believes that the idea of God is kind of nice as long as you don't make it too personal, right? We live in a culture that is not altogether positive toward the idea of God as a creator. We kind of like a God force as a creator. An intelligent design is, a lot of people think that's okay, even a lot of very well-educated people. But I tell you, there are a lot of very well-educated people that believe it can't have been just some intelligent design. There is a first cause. There is a creator. And for the good news for us is that Peter doesn't say commit themselves to a faithful creator. He says to their faithful creator. I'm so grateful that I have a creator. I am not the result of chance over time. I am the result of the intention and work of a creator. The Bible, in my mind, the Bible screams this. So does nature. Well, but not just my creator. Deists believe that basically the universe, the cosmos, are like a clock that God wound up and threw out into space. Now he's way back here somewhere, and the events of life and actions of men and women are now, he exists, and he created, but now it's up to us. And that's an oversimplification, but really it is a piece of the whole deism thing. I don't believe in God in that way, and I don't think you do either. I believe God is my faithful creator. If he is my creator, then he is a personal God. And if he is a faithful creator, why would that matter? Well, it matters in this regard. Because he is a faithful creator, I can be sure that he's never looking the other way when suffering enters my life. He's never surprised by the good or bad events that happen to me in my story. He doesn't care for me sometimes and not care for me other times. He's not like the human parents who are, even with their best intentions, are generally often inconsistent. To be faithful, my faithful creator, there's so much in those words. I commit myself to my faithful creator. This is big. And then why would I do that? Because it would make me feel emotionally stable. No, Well, I mean, that's going to be an outcome, could be an outcome, but what's the purpose? So that I can continue to do good. Doing good, gosh, it's such a warm, fuzzy idea. But isn't that what we're put here to do? Do good. One of the simplest statements about what Jesus did when he was here in the gospel, I believe it's in the Gospel of John, it says he went about doing good. Maybe it was in Matthew. Could have been Mark or Luke. We commit ourselves to our faithful Creator and we continue to do good. Don't give up. That to me is the message. I'm going to quit there for today. See you next time, I hope, on So Care with Stevie Boy.